What's up guys, it's Lord Botha here with another video, and we are taking a look at Venom, The Last Dance. Now Venom has been out for a little while now. The box office numbers are in, and it is, like this franchise, a bit of an enigma. Now I have to say, I'm not the biggest fan of the Venom film franchise from Sony. It's always felt like it was trying to do this impression of the old X-Men or old Spider-Man movies from Sony, but it never quite got it right. And for me personally, they've been the one thing you cannot be as a film, which is not great or bad, but just not memorable. Which is astonishing to me that you can make a Venom movie, in fact, 2 or 3 Venom movies, and they just not be memorable. I mean, it's freaking Venom. It's one of the most recognizable comic book villains, let alone one of the most recognizable Spider-Man villains. I don't know how they're able to make films that are so highly not memorable as they have with Tom Hardy's Venom films. I just don't understand it. But that's how they've been to me. And it's why I wasn't really interested in seeing the third one. That and the whole Venom horse and animals things, it's getting weird. And like weird and not like a funny or cool way. In any event, this comes from the Hollywood Reporter though, that says Venom box office. Last Dance opens to solid $175 million globally despite sluggish $51 million US bow. Well, I will say those are numbers that films like Joker 2 would probably kill for. And at least it made back its initial budget on its opening week. I'm not quite sure how long a legs this film is going to have. Venom The Last Dance had a hard time hitting a home run at the domestic box office, but more than made up for the deficit overseas to boast a worldwide opening on par with the last installment. Nor did it have any trouble coming in number 1 both domestically and globally. Well yeah, there's no real competition right now. Like I just said, Joker Folie à Deux was an absolute flop. I'm not even sure if Beetlejuice is in theaters anymore, and if it is, it's been in there a long time. And you're getting mostly smaller horror franchises like Terrifier that are leading weeks in the box office as this thing was set to release. So yeah, it's not surprising that this thing did number 1 overall. It's really the only superhero project to come out between now and next year, I think. The final title in Sony's franchise based on the popular comic book Anti-Hero opened to $51 million from 4,131 theaters in North America. That's actually really bad. Well behind an expected $65 million or the $90 million domestic launch of Venom Let There Be Carnage. Well, I do have to say that was probably sold a little bit by Carnage. Carnage really the only other major well-known symbiote to maybe even any kind of normie fans that have been interested in Spider-Man over time. And the idea of Carnage fighting Venom was a pretty big sell. But then again, that's a bit like doing Joker in the second film for the Dark Knight franchise, which is why I don't think that the third film in the Dark Knight franchise did that well, because it was kind of like, okay, well, we did the most well-known, biggest villain, where do we really go for here? And the logical move to go for Venom was to the Spider-Man franchise. But they didn't do that. I don't know if it had to do with rights stuff with Sony, or if it was just because they wanted to move on from Eddie Brock being the potential Venom to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. But yeah, it made up the difference here. The expectations were $124 million globally. To start, it had $175 million that it took from the global box office against a budget of $120 million. However, don't forget that a lot less of the money is actually taken by the studios from the overseas box office. Those are kept more by the actual theaters. That said, on all this, if you look up the Rotten Tomatoes numbers, it's actually really popular with the audiences that have seen it. Now, the critics hate the film, but I don't think the critics have really been a fan of any of the Venom movies. And that's all kinds of critics. You have the, leftist critics that really love anything very artistic and gay, that pushes any kind of political point, agenda, etc. And the other audience in terms of critics that would be really interested in this would be the comic book loving critics And I don't think they've really ever been fans of the Venom series because it's always been kind of, like I said, offbeat and weird and funny, but not actually making you laugh, that kind of thing. So yeah, most critics do not like this film, no matter what spectrum you're coming from on them. However, it seems that audiences seem to really enjoy it. My guess is that they enjoy Venom Last Dance the same way they enjoy like a King Kong film. There's not really too much to think about in it. You just enjoy the spectacle and craziness that's happening on the screen. It's also important to note that the Venom movies have typically done well at the box office. The original Venom from 2018 garnished $856 million. Now granted, that was in 2018 when the movie business was radically different, shall we say. Venom Let There Be Carnage in 2021, however, despite the coof fears, still netted a $506 million, nearly $507 million worldwide. Now, will Venom The Last Dance make its budget back? I'd say it has a pretty good chance. It looks like it's getting close to the numbers of the previous film, which probably underperformed because of the sort of pandemic situation happening in 2021. While this film is probably running the same numbers just because it's not as good as the others. So while Let Them Be Carnage probably underperformed, this is probably performing on par with what it should. I also think it's smart for the developers of this film to acknowledge that it is going to be the last in the trilogy starring Tom Hardy. I think that they're smart to realize they've squeezed about as much juice as they could from this orange, and that they should probably move on from it. Because if they made an additional Venom film, for whatever reason, my guess is that it would fall pretty flat. And again, I don't understand really why these films are so popular. I'm not really in the more artistic leftist camp of critic, nor am I in the comic book purist camp. I'm kind of more in just general enjoyment, so this should be the kind of film that appeals to me, right? I know the character of Venom and kind of the backstories of Venom and all that, but I'm also okay with just seeing kind of a fun action film story starring Venom and that character and everything that they developed in the first two movies. The only problem is, again, like I said, they just made those two movies not memorable. I don't feel like I should care about any of the characters. It's just a weird situation and a weird movie. But I guess I'm happy for Sony. It looks like they're going to get a W out of this movie, and the whole villain verse that they're creating, I'm not sure they're going to get many more with that. Morbius was, of course, a historic failure. And Craven, I mean, the only possibility that thing has of being successful is women showing up because they want to see Aaron Taylor Johnson with his shirt off. But that's just my thoughts on Venom The Last Dance and where it stands. If you have your own thoughts, go ahead and leave them in the comments. If you like this video, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, I appreciate you watching all of it. We'll talk to you again later.